Okay, done. I'm all set.
Okay, you're on.
Here we go. Try to get right besides the front.
Call the meeting to order. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is a special meeting of the Board of Education. The agenda tonight consists basically of one item discussion of the budget. I know we have a lot of interest and a lot of people here to try to maintain a productive atmosphere. We're going to try to lay it out this way. Mr. Belair will present his suggested alterations to the budget. He has a PowerPoint presentation, and both for the benefit of the board and of the audience. Following that, the board will ask questions and have some discussion. Then we'll open it to public comments. I'll mention again when we get to public comments. The public comments are just that, comments. Try to restrict yourself to 3 minutes. The board will listen, but we will not at that point engage in a debate or back and forth discussion. After that, the board will continue its deliberations and hopefully arrive at some sort of conclusion tonight. So, if that's acceptable to everyone, Belair.
I think what I'd like to do before I begin a formal presentation is acknowledge town officials who are here with us this evening. Mr. Blevins and I sent out an invitation to Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, as well as our RTM, and also the number of staff, our parents, and we also see some students here. And I'm pleased to see the turnout that we have around this very important discussion that we need to hold tonight. And I'm going to move over to the side. We also have copies for the audience of the PowerPoint as well as the recommendations that I'll be presenting tonight in regards to reductions to our budget. So we'll be distributing those shortly, and I'll just switch sides so that I can speak to the board as well as to the audience.
Chris, I think we'll distribute the PowerPoint.
You could just take one and pass it down so that people can look on. You'll notice here in the slide opening this presentation, there's a reason why it indicates revised. The board adopted the budget back at the end of January at its final meeting of the month. And at that time, the budget was $42,914,414. And that represented a 2.99% increase. That was to be in compliance with the long-range fiscal planning committee here in the town of Waterford. It's revised because that particular budget was predicated on all 6 of our bargaining groups taking a wage freeze. And so with that in mind, we need to do some revising of this budget this evening. So let me give you a status as to where we are with the wage freezes that will really outline our conversation and discussion this evening. As of today, we have the Waterford administrators as well as the 5 central office administrators and directors, technology, maintenance, assistant superintendent, director of business, as well as the superintendent, all agreeing to take a wage freeze for the upcoming fiscal year. That would represent $50,956 in savings. At this time, our Federation of Teachers has decided to not take a vote on either the wage freeze or the concessions. Our secretarial bargaining group has rejected the wage freeze, and I have yet to hear formally from the other 3 bargaining groups. And so, with that in mind, it requires us to adopt a budget that is actually what we adopted back in January. So we have some work cut out for us this evening. And so just to get set of context and some history for the board as well as for the members of the public, because there's been a great deal of work on this budget to date. I think it's important for us to understand what's driving the increases to this budget. A 2.99% increase in our education budget represents $1,247,802 new dollars for us to use for any of the increased costs that we have for the upcoming fiscal year. And I need to tell you there are a number of them. Our certified salaries, taking a look at all 6 bargaining groups, if they were to receive a wage increase, as their contract calls for, represents approximately $900,000 of new costs. So for us to meet those financial obligations, that is new money that we would need to put into our budget for our certified staff. Our non-certified staff represents an increase of $161,854. We all know that based upon our claims over the last few years related to health insurance, we have a significant increase in our health insurance costs. I think what's critical to keep in mind, if you look at this particular dollar amount, that's new money. And then you look at the costs connected to our health insurance. All of that new money is eaten up by that particular bill. But it still leaves us $400,000 short. So as you look at these increases, we also have increases to FICA and Medicare, fuel, unused sick leave, and other increases to the budget. That represents a little over $2.9 million of new costs for the Board of Education. Now, I need to tell you that as you were deliberating on the budget, that was the snapshot in time. Daily, things continue to change. As we go through reductions, you'll see at the end of the presentation, there are certain line items that we need to adjust based upon the reductions that we need to make in order to come into compliance. So those are the drivers. And you can see as you went through the budget, just about every other line item in the budget is colored red. And so we needed to reduce a number of line items in order to come in at that particular dollar amount. Already, we have made a number of reductions to this budget. If we compare where we were on July 1st to where we need to be on July 1st in 2011, we have reduced certified salaries already by a little over $255,000. Let me give you the backup to that. In the budget that's been adopted, we have already reduced a middle school talented and gifted teacher. We have reduced a Great Neck classroom teacher as well as an English teacher at the high school. If you recall with your early retirement incentive, we had 3 retirees. We did not fill those positions. So those 3 FTEs were already reduced prior to the approval of the budget. In addition to that, as we went into the new fiscal year starting July 1st, 2010, a guidance counselor at the middle school was reduced. There were 3 elementary teachers reduced due to enrollment. We needed to increase a Latin teacher by a 0.3. And also with Susan Rosenfield's retirement, we were able to hire her back at less than full-time. However, That benefit will conclude at the end of this school year, and we'll need to refill that position as a full-time position. So that gives you some backup on the certified staff that has already been reduced from this particular fiscal year. So let me just go back for a minute. You also have reductions in temporary pay. That's related to substitute services, and we looked very closely at that, as well as our contracted instructional services on page 40 of the budget. We've reduced nearly $13,000 in maintenance and repairs. Communications, that's internet and phone, we've been able to reduce there. Looking at advertising, we've taken a look at our trending data over the last 3 years. And quite frankly, due to the reduction in force mode that we're about to enter into, there's not going to be a whole lot of need to advertise the new positions. And then looking at other purchase services, we've been able to reduce approximately $36,000. We've also taken a look at instructional supplies before this budget came to you. The various utilities, transportation supplies, namely fuel. Textbooks have already been reduced by nearly $19,000. Equipment for over $13,000. And other areas of the budget, a little over $20,000. So $588,000 plus has been reduced from your adopted budget. So let's take a look at where we are. You also offset some of your increases that I outlined on the first page as drivers. You had some revenue sources. You had some money for before care programs, as well as from the choice program with taking in students from other districts. And we also have the benefit of an educational jobs fund bill this coming year. So this $250,000 worth of revenue was applied to that $2.9 million in additional costs. So that's all part of the adopted budget to date. So, where are we? Well, there's $1,217,734 that needs to be reduced from this budget to hit that bottom line on the very first page of our revised budget. There are a couple of things to keep in mind. The goal that we had going through this process was to preserve the quality of a Waterford public school education. That was number one, and that was foremost in our minds. We want to continue to move the system forward. We're about continuous improvement. One of the things that we know from history, during tough times, your very best organizations continue to move forward. They don't go on pause and they don't retrench, and that's critical. We also need to be able to compete with the very best school systems in southeastern Connecticut. We also have the economic welfare of our community at hand with all of this. We need to remain attractive to potential home buyers. And the decisions that we make today will have a long-lasting impact. And that will have an effect on the economic welfare of our community. So that's absolutely essential that we keep that in the forefront of our mind. That's the lens we use in the recommendations that I'm going to be proposing to you this evening. Let me just highlight the process that we undertook. I have met formally with the entire administrative team 4 different times to really take a look at every single account. And then working closely with high school administration, middle school administration, the 3 elementary, maintenance, business, special education, technology, we have continued to analyze and basically turn over every rock that we possibly could to take a look at where could we squeeze this lemon to get a few more dollars. I have to tell you, looking for $5,000 or $10,000 to get to $1.2 million is a lot of chunks of money. And so that was critical. In addition to that, when I met with the Federation of Teachers and other union leaders, suggestions were brought forward and they've been incorporated into these reductions. We began first by looking at operational costs. We wanted to be sure that we created the least amount of impact to the children of this public school system. That was absolutely critical. So I'm going to begin with the operational side of the house, but also say to you, I believe the process has been inclusive and I believe it's been thorough. So let's take a look at where we can save some money. The wage freeze for the administrative staff will net us a savings of approximately $51,000. I've asked Michael DeRay to really take a look at every single account in the existing budget, project out to June 30th, Where may we have a few dollars remaining? We have some additional money in our salary account, and the reason it's there is for that slide that I showed you on the 3 reductions at the elementary level and middle school guidance counselor. We have some dollars that we're projecting to remain in the salary account, and I'm recommending that we use those dollars to offset the expenses for retirement that will take effect on July 1st. That's for folks who are retiring this fiscal year. So looking at the unused sick leave pay as well as the retirement incentive payout, we can utilize the funding in our salary account. With 5 of the bargaining groups opting not to take the wage freeze, the premium cost share for health insurance will increase by 1%. That will net us an additional $68,350 in revenue. Again, we can utilize these funds against that $1.217 million amount. We have gone back for the last 3 years. We have looked at all the trending data related to tuition reimbursement. We have $83,000 set aside for this. We believe that we can pretty much say it'll come in around $73,000. So I'm recommending that we reduce an additional $10,000 in the tuition reimbursement. Our liability, auto, property insurance savings, when we go out to bid and when we research insurance, we continue to try to sharpen the pencil. We can save an additional $12,310. The next one is a monumental task. And so if we had another year, we'd probably be looking at the entire transportation system. And could we look at something a little bit different? So that's a long-term project for us. But I asked Michael DeRay to work with his staff to take a look at, is there a possibility of consolidating some of our shorter bus runs? Is there a way that we can reduce any of our fleet with our student transportation? Keeping in mind, we need to stay within the policy guidelines that we have for the length of time on a bus ride, as well as maintaining the bus stops. We know that that's an important piece for parents. We believe we can do that by increasing the bus ride of somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes, which will, frankly, keep us under the policy guidelines that we have. Because, again, these are our shorter bus rides that are shorter than the other rides, and save 2 buses. And for me, that saves 2 teaching positions. And so I think that's an important piece of savings from the operational side. The other thing I brought with me tonight, these are 2 tools that we use with our kids at the middle school and the high school, and they're called agenda books. We're looking at eliminating those in the upcoming year. It's approximately $7,000 at the high school and $5,450 at the middle school. We would take that on as an in-house project using our printer here in town and seeing if we can come up with something a little bit different. But that's an area that we need to seriously consider as another alternative. Although it's an important tool, when you're looking at $1.2 million in cutting, I think that's something that we need to seriously consider. We also have an awards dinner in the springtime up at the high school to recognize academic achievement. We want to continue to do that, but currently we expend $3,800 for that function. We need to think about other alternatives. Perhaps there's other sponsors. Perhaps we come back on campus for that recognition dinner, perhaps the Education Foundation. But that would be an area that I would recommend for a reduction. We also have a practice at our high school where we provide the caps and gowns for students for graduation. We're one of the very few high schools that do that in the entire state of Connecticut. And we would continue to do that for this graduating class, but what I'm recommending beginning in the next fiscal year, the budget that we're working on, that we no longer provide the caps and gowns. And there are some other alternatives that the high school can look at, looking at class dues that are distributed across the 4-year experience at the high school. The next item deals with AP tests. And that's been an initiative on the part of the board, I know, for the last 3 years. But looking at splitting the cost, currently it costs us $22,000. The cost for a test is $80. We would pay $40. The families, students, would pay the other $40. This past year, we had 101 students take the AP exams. The previous year, we had 129 students take the exams. I can also tell you we probably have had our best results on advanced placement test scores, and we'll share those with the board at a future meeting. But we have had a dip in the number of students taking the exams as well as the number of tests. But this is a compromise to share that expense with our families. The next item deals with student music activity. We have budgeted $3,900, and we have accompanists and guest musicians come into the school to work with our students. We would want to continue that. However, we would like to continue that for free by inviting volunteers and other community musicians into the schools. So that would be a reduction of $3,900. As you can see as we go through this, it's a number of items to get to $1.2 million. The next item relates again to music. We have a number of extracurricular activities and opportunities for students to expand and continue their practice in the area of music. We're looking at reducing the clarinet, the woodwind, the percussion, and the brass ensemble. These students, however, would continue to rehearse, participate in programs. This is an extracurricular opportunity that happens after school hours. Ed Crane has reviewed the use of our software, and as we get into the next items, you'll see how that review led to these conclusions. We're looking at kind of an array of some of our software purchases of reducing by $1,800. We have a site license that costs us $19,500. It's called Fast Forward. That's an intervention software that provides students additional time with reading strategies. We're looking at having our basic skills teachers in our elementary schools assuming that responsibility as part of our response to intervention approach. The next item is another piece of software that is an expensive site license. In reviewing the usage, there is much more usage at the middle school. We want to continue the site license for grades 6, 7, and 8. That provides good support, academic support to our core subject areas. However, we would remove that at K-5. Looking at the usage, I think it's expendable at this point in time. We're looking at postponing the purchase of 30 new laptops. They would have been to the middle school. However, with the times that we're in, we really need to put that on hold for another year. We look very closely at our athletic program. We currently offer both boys and girls tennis. We have a coach assigned to both teams. This would be eliminating the assistant coach and putting the responsibility in the hands of both coaches. We currently have a coach and 4 assistant coaches for outdoor track. This would be the reduction of 1 assistant. That would still leave 3 assistant coaches for our track program. The next item, and it's a tough one, and it wasn't put up here easily, but again, we're looking at $1.2 million plus of cuts. We have a program that pretty much involves about 10 students. It's expensive. It's $11,570. And we would encourage and help students select other athletic opportunities who would be otherwise involved. The next item, again with track, we have an outdoor track program that really involves approximately 50 students, 25 boys, 25 girls. This is also a program that we offer during the winter season, the indoor track program. It usually involves about 30 students. I would tell you that a number of those students also participate in outdoor track. Again, tough decisions to make, recommending that we eliminate the indoor track program. Looking at our summer school, and our summer school addresses the needs of our special education students with extended year services, as well as some of our regular education students. We would continue to hold it. However, we would modify the program, reduce that from 5 days to 4, and save us $10,000. We look closely at our instructional supply accounts, and we're looking at a 12% reduction across the board for an additional savings of $46,556. Early on, I talked about when times are tough, the tough get going, and you need to continue to move forward as a district. I'm recommending a reduction of school conferences by 50%, not the entire allotment. We have initiatives in place. We need to think differently how we use those dollars. So what I'm recommending here is that we're going to change the focus and the purpose of that money. That money would be utilized strictly for the initiatives that we have in place in district. And that would allow our staff to participate in outside professional development connected to our initiatives and bring that new learning back and share it with our staff. But that's a reduction of half of that dollar amount. We have $140,000 set aside for new texts. We've already reduced the budget by 18. Craig and I looked very carefully at what we have on the plate over the next few years. I can tell you that this is a tough one for me. I'm concerned that we have a renewal cycle that occurs every 7 years. That's way too long. Right now, we're looking at new math standards coming from the state of Connecticut that will be part of any kind of state or national testing for our students. So we're looking at phasing in the purchase of new math texts over the next couple of years. That's the subject area that will be up for renewal beginning in the new school year. That allows us to get at the work and doesn't put us on pause. Now, that's the operational side. The dollar amounts that I just shared with you reach $664,000 plus. That's a substantial amount of money. We're only about halfway home. The remainder of the reductions are all staff related. We have eliminated, I'm recommending the elimination of the site license for Fast Forward. We don't need the 0.2 FTE that's assigned to that. We currently have 1.5 business ed teachers at the high school. We will continue with a full-time staffing position. Based on enrollment, we should be able to absorb the students that opt to take those courses. We're looking at a reduction in the area of Spanish at both the middle school and the high school. The reason why the dollars are different, these are real people. We looked at the individuals who are impacted and their salaries that are connected to each and every one of these positions. At the middle school, it will increase class size from 15 to 22. At the high school, it will go from 19 to around 23 students, excuse me. In another year, it'll be 23,000. But I think what's important to keep in mind is we've attempted. We know class sizes are going to be impacted, but we've kept within contractual guidelines all the way through here. And again, this is where it gets extremely tough. I have to tell you, this is not an easy process. The next, looking at, again, our enrollment at the high school level and some of our special subject areas. We're reducing a section of physical education. It could turn out to be 2 semester courses, which arrives at the 0.2. We also have an enrollment in French 1 projected at 5. With the times that we're facing, I don't believe that's an option for us right now. There are some who have suggested that we actually take a look at eliminating French. This is not the time for that. We've just begun a renewal process. We really need to go through the renewal process, and we really need to identify what it is that we need to do to strengthen our French program. But there would be a reduction of 0.2. This isn't a time to have a class size of 5. We're also looking at restructuring the technology coordinators. We currently have a K-8 position as well as a 9-12 position. We're going to collapse this into one, eliminate one of the positions. And we're going to do this a little bit differently. This individual will be assigned where the need is. Once that need is addressed, we're going to place that individual in another school. We have such an investment in our educational technology. We need to hold on to some support for our staff. So that will be a critical piece. So that would be the reduction in that particular area. At the elementary level, we're looking at a reduction of 5 classroom teachers. 1 at Great Neck, 2 at Quaker Hill. The CRT stands for classroom teacher, and 2 at Oswegatchie. Let me just show you the slide, and you have it in your packet as well as here at the table. I have highlighted where the 5 staff members are coming from. So you can see what the class size will look like for example, at Great Neck. You're looking at two sections of 22 and 23. Initially, we had that in the teens range, somewhere around 17. And again, times are tough right now. We're trying to look at where we can save a few dollars and minimize the impact on our students and also minimize the reduction of our staff. So we're looking at reducing a section in grade 5. At grade 2, initially in the budget that you approved, you were at 14 and 15. This now increases the class size to 19 and 20. Grade 4, in the budget that you looked at before, it was 16 and 17. It's going to be increased to 21 to 22. Oswegatchie, in grade 3, we have reduced one position. Initially, that was at 16 and 17, and then in the 5th grade, it was at 17 and 18. There's a reduction of 5 classroom teaching positions. You will note at the bottom, again, these are averages, and they're pretty close across the schools. But one of the things we need to realize is a variable is where the kids reside. But again, our primary focus was really taking a look at the early grades and really looking at early literacy and numeracy. And so in grades 1 and 2, all classes are in the teens and a couple of sections of 20. Our goal was to keep those classes 20 and below. And then as you move up, again, depending upon where the enrollment is, you have a range from 17 to as high as 24. And the 24 is at grade 5. So that's something to keep in mind. So those are the reductions at the elementary level. Now, commensurate with those reductions, we will also have a lesser need for our special subject area staff. We're looking at 5 fewer sections. So we're looking at a reduction in the area of elementary art, elementary music, as well as elementary PE. Along with that reduction, we're also looking at restructuring that. So we gain a little bit more instructional time in the core areas, in particular in the area of literacy. So we're looking at art once a week, music twice a week, phys ed twice a week, and library once. So over a 6-day cycle, we're also looking at increasing the length of that instructional period to 35 minutes. The students now have a little longer time in that one session in the special subject area, but we're also gaining some instructional time in our core areas. So this goes hand in hand with the reduction of the 5 teaching positions. Now as we move to the non-certified staff, I'm only on number 39 and we have just about 50 items on this roster. But we have 2 custodial vacancies. We're looking at eliminating the athletic custodian, and those responsibilities would be assumed by both the athletic department as well as some of our student athletes. And we have a home for that individual. We have a vacancy at the high school level. So we would be moving that individual to another position, but we would be eliminating the custodial staff by 1 FTE there. 40 and 41 kind of go hand in hand. We currently have 2 security positions plus a school youth officer at our high school, as well as 3 administrators. We would transfer 1 security position out of the high school to the middle school. Move the individual who's at a custodial position at the middle school into the vacancy. So it's a reduction of a security position up there. So that's why you see no dollars saved in number 40, but the security salary in number 41. We currently have 2 vacancies in our paraprofessional staff. We will reassign responsibilities and not fill those vacancies. So that's a reduction of 2 FTEs in the paraprofessionals. We recently had a retirement of a secretary at the high school. We're looking at reducing that position due to attrition and not refilling it. And again, those responsibilities would be reassigned. We're also looking at reducing a special education secretary that is split between our middle school and high school. Reassigning those responsibilities and also having some of our secretarial staff at the central office take on some of that responsibility. It was a great idea when we had the ARA funding arrived here in Waterford to establish a job coach. But at the same time, we also took a different turn in the economic scene. And that job coach was intended to help our special education students actually find employment. Well, it hasn't happened. And so looking at what our intent was, we would eliminate that position. The next position relates to a transition coordinator, and this is for students aged 16 to 21. We would be, again, reassigning these responsibilities to our special education staff, but still hold on to the 0.5 staffing position that we have for learning through service. What you need to keep in mind with these recommendations, our budget now starts to move all around in a variety of accounts. Quite frankly, some of these reductions now incur new costs. And so one of the things that we need to do is then go back into the budget and backfill. So here are a couple of ramifications of the reductions that we need to go through. We need to now budget $217,000 for unemployment insurance. If you've been following what's happening in our neighboring communities, many districts are going through the same angst that we're going through with their budgets and with our staffing. We're anticipating, and we need to budget to cover this, probably half of the staff that we lay off are not going to be able to find other employment. So it's prudent for us to make sure that we budget that money. So we need to increase that line item by $217,000. We now will have 5 of our bargaining groups go through negotiations this summer. One of the things we did was reduce legal costs, thinking about the wage freeze that we would be extending out a contract. We will have some additional legal expenses to incur through that process. So we will be adding $30,000 back into the budget. We also have recalculated and reviewed all of the employee benefits, and we need to budget in a little over $19,000. With the changes that we made, going way back to the reduction in English and then the reduction in French, we need to backfill and create a 0.2 English for some response to intervention and some additional reading support at our high school level. These 50 recommendations hit the bullseye of $1,217,734. I have to tell you that it was not an easy process, and it really was a team effort to get there. And I have to commend all of the administrative team who took themselves out of the position as principal or leader, one of the leaders in their school, to really take a look at the kindergarten through grade 12 focus for the Waterford Public Schools. But let's take a look at what this does to our staffing levels in our school district. The budget reductions that I've presented tonight reduce our certified staff by 9.9, our non-certified staff by 7.5. The budget process has already reduced 6.15 certified staffing positions, as well as 2.83. So when you compare this back to where we were July 1st, 2010, we have just reduced this budget by 16 certified staff and a little over 10 non-certified staff. That's significant. And so it gets back to the $1,217,000 and the impact that that has on reducing our budget. Now, at the beginning I shared that we tried to look at every possible item in the budget. We took a look at our elementary tag program, and at this time we are not recommending the elimination of that program. Recently it went through a renewal. It's an accelerated math component. We need more time to study that. We may be back here a year from now taking another look at that. We also took a look at our instrumental music program. Could we continue that program with the understanding that we needed to reduce this budget by over $1.2 million? At this time, we're keeping that program intact, K-8. We also looked at increasing the number of sections that our middle school and high school teachers teach, and we may need to take a serious look at that in the next budget cycle. We also talked about pay for play. if we instituted a $25 fee or a $50 fee or a $100 fee. And perhaps we need a little bit more time. If you recall, at our last board meeting, I raised the question. I thought we had an interesting and healthy conversation, and maybe we'll get back to that again this evening, but we felt that perhaps we needed a little bit more time. I already spoke about the French program. We also looked at perhaps moving away from an interscholastic athletic program at the middle school and instituting a pretty robust intramural program. It would save us some money, but I would also say to you we need more time to study that. So those items were looked at, but we feel pretty strongly that not at this time. So let me just summarize a couple of things as we get to some discussion this evening. I want you to keep in mind the lens that we use to make these recommendations. We put the child in the center. We really looked at the integrity and the quality of the Waterford Public School educational program. It's going to be impacted with this amount of cut, but how can we minimize the cut? So it's about 50-50. 50% reductions on the operational side, but I can tell you some of those impacts are instructional resources. And then on the other side, it all relates to staffing. So what's really critical is that we really think clearly about the decisions that we make and what impact they have on the long-term economic welfare of this community. Do we remain competitive with our neighbors? Do we continue to be attractive to our home buyers? Because that's critical to the economic welfare. So I guess I can pause here and say, I think we're ready for questions.
Thank you, Jerry.
Okay, we will, as I said before, we'll start with the board, and I would ask a preliminary from the board. Let's start with clarifications, questions, factual questions that you'd like to have cleared up. Anything along that line? Kathleen?
I just have one for Mr. Miller on the recommendations with the additional cuts in some of the departments that already been cut. Are these in addition to those? Because I tried to look at some of the figures, I couldn't make them balance. So
These 50 line items are in addition to what's already been reduced. And what is approved tonight, we will go back and redo this entire budget book for the Board of Finance.
in that case, when we get to looking at each item, I may just question you on one of those.
Any other general questions? Jody?
Jerry, have we looked into number 22, the summer program? Have we looked into possibly offering it with another town to cut the expenses?
And let me turn to both Kathy and Sue, because we looked very carefully at the summer school program. What modifications could we make but still provide the service?
For the number of students who are eligible for extended school year, at this point, I don't know as we would save money by joining with another town, because our class size for the special ed classes is pretty much at capacity for one teacher. I mean, it's certainly something that I think Learn has brought up in terms of a discussion as part of looking at regional costs, and could be continued as a discussion with Learn.
We also talked about if we left our district, our transportation costs would be higher. So if we hosted and if we had any spaces, perhaps we could invite others in.
That's what I was thinking, because we have the new elementary schools and they're air conditioned, and it would be a nice atmosphere.
Yep.
This is another question, maybe for the high school. As far as the indoor track program goes, would it be possible to offer that as an intramural during the winter? So that the students that want to do outdoor track in the spring can still stay in shape?
It's possible. There is always a cost associated with that. That was not an alternative that I looked at yet.
Other questions?
If I may, just on clarification, can you just address the ensemble, the music ensemble, and you mentioned the after school, so just exactly how that can function?
Well, it would still keep intact the jazz ensemble, but where it would impact would be the brass, the woodwind, percussion, and clarinet. those students would still participate in all of the activities. My understanding is this is an extracurricular, it's an after-school additional rehearsal. And again, the tough part of this was, where can we find some funds here and there to get to the $1.2 million cut? And so that was a recommendation that came from the high school. We talked about it, discussed it at length with the entire team.
Other questions? All right, maybe we can proceed through the board with at least preliminary suggestions or suggested changes. We'll have some of that discussion, and soon I'll open it up to members of the audience to offer similar suggestions, but it seems like the board has to say first. So. If anybody has anything to say. Kim.
Getting back to Jody's issue about the winter track program, notwithstanding my own biases about these things, my first coaching job in 1984 was the winter track coach at Waterford High School. I would hope that we might revisit a discussion about pay to play or some kind of an activity fund before we unilaterally eliminate entire programs, the indoor track team, the golf team. We've already eliminated some freshman programs, and there are a number of concerns that I have. If we eliminate winter track for women in the winter at the high school, we will be down to basketball and cheerleading, correct? Basketball without a discrete freshman program can't be much more than 20 girls. That would be a heavy number, I would think, but maybe they would keep 20 without the freshman program. Cheerleading, it's got to be in the 20s maybe. So we're looking at athletic opportunities for women at Waterford High School of less than 50 places, which is a concern for me, notwithstanding my own personal bias about track. But I think that this really reduces our offerings in this particular season, and it's a long season, and I would hate to see large numbers of our female athletes in particular, because at least the men have swimming in the winter, wrestling in the winter, basketball in the winter. There's a little bit more offerings. But for our women athletes, it really eliminates a lot of their participation possibilities. We had a girl go to the New Englands this year from the winter track program. It's not a huge program, but I think we're still seeing a lot of success and a lot of very positive things out of that program. We are the only school in the entire league, 17 teams, that has a facility for indoor track. Those of us who coach indoor track elsewhere would love to have a field house so that we could have actual indoor track practice. And it just seems kind of counterintuitive that we not have an indoor program when we have a field house and the ability to have an indoor practice and indoor meets. So that makes me a little nuts. I hate to see the golf program eliminated as well. I think that both of these programs appeal to some of our non-traditional athletes. They're not the baseball, football, basketball crew. And I think it further impinges on their ability to participate, which I hate to see. And again, pay to play is not the perfect solution, but it is used by some of our neighboring towns. It is used successfully. When I think of the amount of money that people are paying for AAU programs, for traveling teams, for all kinds of other athletic programs, a fee to participate in high school athletics is not outrageous. I'm sure we would have a provision for students who could not afford it. We might even be able to reinstate the freshman programs that we've already eliminated if we had a pay to play. We'd have to look at numbers, but I just think that we really ought to take another real hard look at that.
Other comments? I'm waiting for someone to propose additional cuts to make up. We'll see where we go. Joyce?
It's just a point of information. I feel badly that we had to cut the track over at Park Lane. And I realize we have to do it, but would it be possible to offer some type of a tech program after school at Park Lane? If we could get some teachers to help us do that? Or want to just keep that on the back burner? Just to think about that.
The problem, Cody, with after school, I mean, it's not free. I mean,
Right.
there's supplemental pay that has to be paid. I mean, it's not the same as a full-time tech teacher, but it's still additional money.
We can go through the Education Foundation and get money for that. It's just, I just want to keep our mind.
I mean, I'm just saying that, if we did that, that would be additional expense that we'd have to offset somewhere. Okay. Kathleen?
No, this is a difficult budget, and I want to just compliment the superintendent. It was a lot you can see. I went through it thoroughly, go back to what the actual spending was a few years ago. It looks like in every category we did cut, but I did find a few small items, and they total up to approximately $17,000, which then we might be able to have a discussion on reinstating something. I don't know, and perhaps I gave an error in it, but then we could perhaps just take a quick look. And I want to apologize for my voice. I've been without a voice all week and just seem to have regained it this evening. So, sorry. It would be on page 65 under travel. If we reduce the proposed 15,000 to the 12,000 back to the actual that we used in 2010, that would save $2,356 more.
Are you thinking about the
District travel,
the $15,011?
yes.
That would be contractual for reimbursing staff that are in between buildings. Is that the funding that's used for that?
Yes. For district-wide itinerant travel?
Yeah, we have a contractual obligation with that particular line item. Staff that are shared between schools during their workday, driving back and forth, they're reimbursed for mileage.
And that has increased since the
I know
the last one.
I presume we use the IRS amount.
Yeah.
That has increased in the last couple
It most likely will increase before we start the new school year.
But that's the actual what we use right currently, so there's no way to reduce that to the 10. Okay. The other one was on also contracted services on page 65. This is where I had a question on the conferences. That's why I asked the original question whether this was in combination. So when you said 50%, I believe that's, I didn't come out with the 13,000.
That's what we put aside for our teaching staff, the dollar amount that I posted.
Right. But if we took 50% of what was proposed, it would be a little bit more. Okay, but these are just, I know this is like really looking with a fine comb. I'm just trying to see if there's any other room within the budget so we can go back and try to reinstate perhaps some of these areas that are affecting our students. On page 51, postage, I reduced that by to $978 going back. I know we're going to have probably more postage. I know this is difficult, but. And then the last one.
I'm sorry.
Which one was that?
Was on page 51 under postage. I went back to the actual usage in 2010 that was proposed. It's a very small figure, but and then the last one was on our dues and fees, and we talked about that before. We do have quite a few organizations.
What page are you on, Kathleen?
Page 88. And I know number of these are very valuable, and it's a difficult decision. Keeps up professional development, and they're important. But the one that I thought we might discuss possibly, which I know was matter of discussion back when we looked at it, was the Coalition for Justice is another $1,500, and that organization would probably continue to do its work, and we might be able to save a little. In fact, years ago, we didn't belong to some of these organizations, so if we even suspended it just for a year, there could be some savings until we get through this difficult time with the healthcare costs, which is really the driving piece of this budget. So I would like just to, while I have the microphone, just say that I think we're going to come past this difficult time, and we really need to try to hold on to the programs that we've built up over the years. In the same time, we need to be fiscally conservative with knowing that the town needs to stay, the Board of Finance has its job, that we need to stay within the 2.99. We've built up tremendous collaboration over the years with the town. We're working in that spirit tonight. Some difficult decisions are going to be made, and these may sound like very small items, but they, when I added them up, not knowing that we couldn't reduce the travel a little bit, it came to about $17,000. Every other category really went right back for a couple years. There's really no room within this budget to find extra money. So I just want to point that out to the public. It's really been thoroughly researched. I can tell that.
Kathleen? Others? Anyone else? Yeah, John.
I think that this is difficult. There are items that I think affect us, and we'd all like to see those items reinstituted because they're personal to us. There are some certainly that I would like to not see changed, but I think we have to kind of keep our eye on the ball here. This is difficult. Kathleen hinted at the real driver is the increase in health care costs that we have experienced. I think it would just be important to let everybody know that there is a committee that is working on that. We've had several meetings. I think we've kind of gotten our arms around the problem. Our initiative is to, or our objective rather, is to reduce the cost to the town, provide fair benefits to our workers, and also find a way to get off of the roller coaster ride that we're on, that every year we go way up, we might go down the next year, and then we go back up the next year. So we are working to try and get a handle on the health care costs and eliminate the roller coaster ride that we're on. I think right on Jerry's third slide, one of the big elements there is $1.6 million increase due to health care costs. Well, if there was no increased costs in health care, we might not be here tonight. So that really is the big driver that's causing us to be here, but I want everybody to know that we are working on it. It's something that we hope to infuse into the next contract negotiations to try and stabilize our finances. So I think it's important for folks to know that we are working on that. We're working on it very seriously. But again, all these little cuts, I think you've done a fantastic job. And the fact that you've involved all of the administrators and all the stakeholders in the school system trying to comb out and find reductions, minimize, as you said, minimize the impact to the integrity and quality of our education. Yes, there are going to be impacts and effects to people. But I mean, that's the way it has to be. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I have a couple of small questions, I guess. Regarding the agendas at Parkland and the middle school, those agendas include the rules of conduct and various policies that have to be made, announced to students. So I presume that when you say we'll do stuff in-house, you mean we will continue to produce something that has that information.
We would, as well as also post this online.
I think it's important that, I think posting online is great, but I think even technically, legally, we have to hand them something that they can sign off on. So but the savings, the reduction that you have here takes into account any extra cost that would be required to produce.
It does.
The other questions regarding the AP tests, I remember when we instituted the practice of paying the full cost of it, there was discussion of whether the tests would be a required part of the AP course, and I don't frankly remember what we decided. Don, is it that now?
Yes, they are.
Okay. If that's true, then I have to object to this one. In general, I've said it before, and we'll talk about it if we discuss papers, but my feeling is that the public education is the public's responsibility, and no parent should be put in the position of having to decide whether they can afford their child's education or dinner next week. And I know that's an exaggeration, but with that in mind, as long as that's a required part of the course, I would not support having the students and their families pay for it. We're supposed to pay for it. The alternative would be to remove that as a requirement for the course. I would still object to that, but at least it's not, strictly speaking, making them pay for their education. So that's the problem I have with that one. I have a similar problem with caps and gowns. Again, that's not really the education, but I think the graduation experience is an essential and integral part of the overall school experience. If there's someone who can't afford the rental of a cap and gown, which would be somewhere $30, $40, something like $30, I think that at the very least we would have to make sure that anyone that couldn't afford it, there would be some responsibility for providing it. And if we're going to do that, then we get into how many is that going to be, who administers it, who decides whether they can or cannot afford it. And we're going to get back to what we found when we looked at the parking fees, that the net result is not worth the hassle. And again, on my general principle of I don't want families and parents to pay for public education, I object to that line also. So we'll add that to the list of things we've got to talk about. Yes?
Just very quickly, because I'd like to hear what everyone else here has to say, but the two things that jumped out at me, Don, were what you just mentioned, AP tests and the caps and gowns. And if we are going to keep our students front and center, I think that those are two things that we should look at not eliminating money for.
Any other comments from the board right now? Yeah, Kathleen.
Since we're just off of clarification, talking about different topics, I just want to point out that I'm very pleased that the French program was not eliminated. The point two, I think we want to clarify that those students can be absorbed into the French 2 class, so we're not going to be denying students the opportunity to take French. I think that's important to say. And also to remind the board that very shortly the state will be mandating world languages as a requirement to graduate from high school. Therefore, I think it would be incumbent upon us to protect the quality of our world language programs here in Waterford, since they will be, in fact, mandated. And if you recall, just recently, we eliminated the Spanish at the elementary school level with the understanding that we would bring in a consultant and really review it. I know Mr. Powers has done that, and that we have a highly professional consultant that's working with the language program. But it would be my hope in the future that we would encourage the world languages program from the elementary right through the high school, And I think we do need to be very creative, however, and innovative in this very difficult time. I suggested, and Mr. Blevins knows, and the board, that the policy committee begin to look once again at other sources of revenue. Is there a way that we can find private partnerships to work along with us so that we can continue to provide the quality programs during this difficult time? So just for the public to know that this is very tough on this Board of Education that has worked very hard over the years to be sure that we're building the quality of the programs in Waterford. So I just would like to say that the language program will be still in effect.
Shall we, Tim?
Just two quick questions about particular line items that I have an issue with. One of the drivers that was mentioned in the PowerPoint was athletic field trips to middle and high school, an increase of $12,000. And the percentage of increase in that was very significant. And I was just wondering what the root problem there was.
Transportation costs, Mike. Our transportation costs the previous year, the budget was cut, and we actually exceeded our budget.
So we went over.
We went over, and therefore we looked at what was really necessary for the athletic field trips, particularly with the high school.
And the other was on page 48 under insurance, the last two items, insurance interscholastic Clark Lane and insurance interscholastic Waterford High School. There's 177% increase in one and 165% increase in the other.
That's correct. The premiums were level funded for many years, probably about 6 or 7 years. However,
I can see that going back it was the same.
However, our actual claims last year exceeded significantly what we were paying into, and therefore our premiums are going up next year.
Okay.
And I do have information on that if you'd like to have it at a later date.
Thanks. Okay.
Jim, that's about $12,000 increase, when you look at that percentage, but it's $12,000, and it's really due to the claims, the injuries.
At this point, let's move to the public. I remind you that we would like to not, I'm sure you don't want to spend all night here either, so hold your comments to as brief as possible, 3 minutes. You may ask questions, but I have to tell you right now, you won't immediately get an answer. In that we are not going to respond to things you say, because if we start doing that, it pretty soon degenerates into a one-on-one debate. Rest assured that we will take notes of factual questions that you ask, and they will be answered, but just not as a direct response to what you're saying right then. And it's not because we're trying to ignore you. We just want to make this process work well. So, there's a microphone at the podium up here. So, anybody wants to speak? Yeah, please identify yourself if you would.
Good evening. My name is John Foley. I'm a district representative on the RTM. I'm here tonight as an RTM member because I don't think we're going to get another crack at this budget. I think decisions are going to be made today. And I'm going to focus my comments on the Talented and Gifted program. My disclaimer is I do not have a child in the Talented and Gifted program, so this is not for any personal reason other than as a physician and a scientist. I've always believed that education needs to address the needs of every child in the school, from special needs to the children in the middle to the absolute children at the top. If this town wants to be competitive, if we want to continue to have a school system that people move here to bring their children to, it has to address those issues. I understand the caps and gowns issues. This is a real issue. I understand also that helping to pay for the advanced placement test is a nice thing to do, but we could make taking the test optional, and we could save all of the money. I think that's an administrative thing. A kid can still take an AP course and make the decision as to whether they're going to take the test and get college credit. If there's a way of keeping the TAG program throughout, I think that this board should try to do that. Athletics are important. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people behind me who are going to be very upset, potentially at sports being cut. I'm upset about that too. But this is education. And education, first and foremost, has to educate children. And I think we have to educate all of our children, whether they be at the very top, academically gifted, or not. And I applaud you, because this was a Herculean task that you did, and I think you've done a superb job. But I would ask that you look at what you're saving in eliminating TAG from the middle school program and what we're losing as an educational opportunity for our children and as a recruitment tool for this town. Thank you.
Hi, how you doing? Mark Foster. Same issue, the TAG program. That was the thing that I was most concerned about and what brought me down here today. And as our last speaker, I no longer have any children in the town, but it was a program that my kids took part in, and it's one that I feel is very important. Jody had mentioned doing something after school. I don't know how you see that happening as a one-day-a-week sort of thing, possibly. I don't really know. Sometimes I have a habit of offering things that my wife or my building principal or somebody tells me I shouldn't be offering, but if you want an after-school program for the next year, and I have some reservations about doing that if somebody was just cut who's a part of my union. So I would like to stipulate that for the next year, I wouldn't mind doing that while we find some way to drop back and punt and hopefully finance that position the way it was this year.
Hi, my name is David Bednars. I'm a resident with a daughter in elementary school, and I'm also a high school science teacher at a neighboring town. I want to speak about AP and pay for play, pay for park. As a almost 20-year faculty in a neighboring district, we have never had pay for AP testing. I am an AP teacher, and I got to tell you, I would love to have my daughter someday have her AP test. I'm hoping she will be an AP and that they'll get paid for. But we don't pay for them, and my personal experience has been 1 to 2 kids, maybe 3 out of a class of 20 to 25 don't take the test, and it's not for financial reasons. We have in place, if students have financial need and if they demonstrate that, the test is then of course paid for. We make it as a strongly recommended but not a needed part. I'm also a University of Connecticut early college experience teacher. I had 23 students in my UConn class this year. Each had to pay $75 to the University of Connecticut for the privilege of taking the course. Every single student paid it so that they could potentially get the college credit and have the right to get the UConn transcript with the requisite grade. And again, as almost 20 years in a neighboring town who has a budget much less than Waterford, and I gotta say that we do quite well in CAP scores and other areas. Pay for parking and pay for play have been something we've done. I know some people don't want to do that, but it's been around for a while. Again, if there's financial hardship, kids get excused. There's a cap on the number of sports they have to pay for. So I think rather than shutting down avenues, there's still lots of places to look to save. And I agree with the previous teachers. I think TAG is a very important thing to keep for our upcoming students. Thank you.
Hi, Diane Foster. I am a resident of Waterford, but I teach at the Isaac School, which is a charter school locally. I have experience in other high schools, and I just wanted to add to your discussion of caps and gowns funding that Caps and gowns in the high school where I worked were funded through student dues, through the class dues that students would pay, as were all of their class activities were funded through that dues program, and it did not have to be funded by the school board or budget, so that was part of, the kids didn't have to pay, it was part of their dues. So granted they were paying dues for their activities, but it is a way for them to maintain that cap and gown without having them having to pay for them individually. And I would also say that my high school also had an AP program where the test was not a required part of the curriculum, and the students did indeed pay if they were interested in taking the test. It was something that they were invited to do. It was not something they were required to do, so that's an option as well. And I would also, as a teacher, as a taxpayer and a teacher, really, really like to see the gifted program continue for our students, because we have so many support options and staffing options and that are available for our special needs students. And I would really like to make that one opportunity available to our gifted kids. It's all they have. And I think it's really important that as an educational facility we maintain that above and beyond many of the extracurricular and athletic endeavors that they have available. Thank you.
Welcome back.
We're 4th, 7th grade tech students who attend Clark Lane Middle School. We recently started a petition to people to sign that supported the Talented Youth program. We have around 170 signatures. And
that was in just a few days, so we didn't have a lot of time. When you're saying that you're gonna provide an alternative for the music program by getting volunteers to come in, could you get volunteers to come in and teach stuff to us tag students? Maybe high schoolers that are taking AP classes, they can earn LTS hours for that, or local community members who want to teach us something about engineering or something.
We think if you can't provide tag, we should at least have an alternative, seeing how it's one of the only programs that's offered it's the only program that's offered to kids above average. And we realized that money is really easy to come by right now, and we were thinking maybe we could organize science the same way we organize math. You have different levels of ability, and you learn at your own pace. This way, you don't have to pay an extra teacher, but we still get to move at a faster pace than those around us. And we could also have maybe, she said, a after-school program tag. And we were thinking that we could do the tag program we had 3rd and 4th grade before you change the program. So it was about thinking. And I was curious, I know you guys don't really want to answer questions, but how many of the people on the board know the meaning of the word metacognition? Metacognition is one of the first things you learn about when coming to tag in 3rd grade. The word means thinking about your thinking. Even if you discover something in science or math, if you can't explain it to other people, it won't matter because they won't be able to understand it.
I'd just like to quote Mr. Belair. In your PowerPoint, you said we should preserve the quality of our education, and I felt that by cutting tag, that's not really what we're doing.
Also, with pay for play, even if we did pay for play, people would still have the option to play sports, whereas when you eliminate tag, there is no other option for us to go anywhere. We can't really organize the program like that ourselves. Also, we looked on the Waterford Public Schools homepage, and on the homepage, one of the paragraphs says, Waterford has recently raised student expectations and focused on meeting the needs of high-achieving students by redesigning the Talented and Gifted program to utilize the integrated curriculum model developed through the Center for Gifted Education at the College of William and Mary. You obviously take pride in your TAG program if you're willing to put it on your very first page for the entire town public school.
And future residents who are checking out the town.
Advanced programs do attract potential residents who are looking for a place to move.
I know that one of the main things that residents would look for is a good school system because they want their kids to be educated very well.
Okay, and I also found the Connecticut Directory of Gifted and Talented Programs, and on the section for Waterford, it says the vision. Every child has a right to an education that gives him or her an opportunity to realize his or her full potential. Which is exactly what TAG does for us.
If we were to do an alternative class, it doesn't have to be after school. There's other options of when it could be lunchtime. I'm sure we would sacrifice our lunchtime to have a class.
So,
thank you.
I'm not sure I want to follow that. My name's Scott Zettler. I'm a resident of Waterford and have been for almost 7 years. And I do have a daughter I have 2 daughters in elementary school. One is in the TAG program, and she's going to middle school next year. So I'd like to echo the other comments, the other remarks. The reason I came here tonight is to talk about TAG. It's been a tremendous program. I think it's a major asset for the town. I know when my wife and I were looking at where to move, we moved from New Jersey. We were looking between East Lyme and Waterford and ultimately chose Waterford because we liked the feel of the town, and TAG, we had very young kids at the time, but TAG was an appealing part of the school system here. It meant that excellence meant something in Waterford, and I know Superintendent Belair, excellence is very important to you, and I know that you've been emphasizing that to the teachers, and I really appreciate that. I'm a mechanical engineer by background and work at a biotech company, and I know that excellence is really critical in the work that we do, and it's really critical for the future of our country. Science and math are really the foundations for the future. And I want to see that fostered in our school system and all the school systems across the country. Because I was talking with somebody recently, and they're from another country, and other countries are really focusing on math and science. And if we don't, and I know Waterford's just one town, but if we don't as a country, we're really going to be falling behind. So I wanted to add my opinion around TAG at the middle school. I was really glad to see that at the elementary school it's going to be preserved, hopefully for a very long time. Just my 2 cents, I grew up in New Jersey. I had to pay for my cap and gown when I graduated high school. I had to pay for my AP exams that I took. I took chemistry and math at that time. And it was okay. I mean, I think that that's a fair price to pay, as long as it is optional. I agree. You don't want to make it mandatory, and then if somebody can't afford it, that is totally inappropriate. I agree. But I do greatly appreciate the work and effort you put into this budget study. It must have been a tremendous effort, and thank you for doing it and focusing on the benefit to the kids. I know I speak for myself and probably a lot of others that's really where the focus needs to be for this budget. What we're all here for is for the benefit of the kids. So thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Bob Price. Unlike most of the previous speakers, my daughter was one of the four that was up here a couple minutes ago. And I know she puts you all on the spot and makes you feel better. I have a master's degree in history, and I did not know what metacognition was until my daughter was in third grade. So I think the world of the TAG program here. To echo some of the previous comments by some of the speakers, the school here should be focused on the education of the students above that of sports. So I think we really should look at pay for play, possibly shifting some more of the, I'd like to see some more of the assistant coaches maybe shifted over, and maybe that's a way to pay for a after-school tag program, take away another assistant coach. I know you mentioned Superintendent Belair that there were 4 assistant track coaches. You were cutting down to 3. I don't know how many other assistant coaching positions there are. I know this is going to be hard to believe, but a long time ago, I was a long-distance runner on the track team. That doesn't show. But we had 1 coach, 1 assistant coach, and a lot of leadership from the seniors. And maybe that's something that we need to take another look at. Cutting back on the assistant coaching positions does give the advanced students or the older students a chance to develop their leadership abilities as well. So, also wanted to remind you, Superintendent Belair, twice you mentioned that the tough times, the best organizations continue to move forward. And if we cut TAG out of the middle school program, and I came here tonight prepared to argue for the elementary school program too. I was pleasantly surprised to see that you kept that. But if we cut TAG out of the middle school program, then I don't think that we are moving forward. That's all. Thank you.
Paula Corrado. I have been a resident of Waterford since 1962. And I think anyone who believes that the discussions here tonight are only the beginning, or rather the end, of difficult discussions with the education system and its funding is very naive. The pot from which the money comes does not grow as fast as the expenses ever grow. I think we all know that. So I think the decisions that are being made tonight and in the future are only the beginning. Some of the things that Waterford pays for now, such as caps and gowns and AP tests, came about when the golden eggs from the goose down the road were much larger than they are now. So I think there are some of those things that can go back to the way they were when our kids were in school and we paid for the caps and gowns and several other things. To eliminate the TAG program without cutting anything from basketball, baseball, or football, to me is appalling. To cut from instrumental music, to cut from instrumental music without serious consideration of pay for play for baseball, basketball, and football, to me is appalling. We are falling behind the Chinese, some of the Europeans. When our son was getting a PhD at MIT, he lived in student housing. He was the only American on his floor. It doesn't say much if we can't get enough students in that he was the only native-born American on a whole dorm floor at MIT. So we need to figure out where our priorities lie. And pay for sports. Pay for play for sports is not an unreasonable thing to consider. Thank you.
Good evening. I also have the voice thing going on, so I apologize. Frederica Gunther. I've been a long-time resident of Waterford. I was actually on the board many, many years ago. So I have my comments are written down. It's a little different than the other speakers. The health care, though, I urge you to be a little more creative with that and maybe talk to some of the people in town that are in that business. Maybe they have some suggestions for you. I think it's a time where you really, really have to be creative with that, since that's your biggest cost. That's where you really need to start. Also, the heat here could be turned down a little bit. I want to say to Superintendent Belair, none of these remarks are reflected on you because you just got on board. Randy Collins, let me see if I'm speaking this, budget proposal included a plan for all employees to work next year without a raise. Really, did his plan for this past year plan around the fact that he would retire and then collect for being interim superintendent for how long and at what rate of pay? I'm really concerned about the rate of pay. We have an issue in a surrounding town going on with similar issues. Where's the money for Randy Collins' retirement payout and the cost of his insurance coming from? I'm wondering if a lot of these are causing us these ridiculous problems that we have at this point, causing these kids to come and beg for their programs, which is absolutely ludicrous that we should be at this point in Waterford. All right, so I want to, I've asked for these figures, and I know I asked for them late, so I understand that, because it is freedom of information. My experience is a lot of information does not get out there to the public, and sometimes not even to the board members. So let me go on. In January, this is a quote, the school administration received word of a $1.6 million increase in the cost of insurance, mainly due to a hike in claims. Again, the word is on the street, Dr. Collins got a nice package including health insurance. I don't believe anyone else gets that little perk. That's really unbelievable in this climate. How is that decided if that's true? I don't know if it's true. And how much is that costing us? How much is that reflecting on the cost of insurance, our high cost of insurance? What was the cost of the search committee to look for a superintendent? Well, it looks like you have a very nice person here, from what I can see. Again, the word is that we really wouldn't have needed that if it was known in advance when Randy was going to retire. Question that I have, and I'd like the answer to at some point, when was the board made aware of Randy's decision to retire? I don't, when he actually, that's, I think, something I would like to know. Okay. I think the word is, if Randy had been a little more forthcoming about that date, we might not have to have expanded and had the expense of such a search. I think there was a candidate, at least I heard, that was pretty known to the system, that had maybe been in the system. We wouldn't have had to have had Randy fill in for such a long time helping out, and I think we would have been happy and spent a lot less money. And I really wonder how much was wasted. Money was wasted with all this foolishness. Okay, let me see, where am I? Okay, I can't expect, and this is from Superintendent Belair, I can't expect to lay off a janitor, and I have to add, that's kind of, I think janitors do a lot more than janitors. Our perception of janitors from years ago, making $30,000 and give a teacher making $60,000 a 4.5 raise. And the thing that bothers me is this was a negotiated contract. At that point, the board agreed that was okay. There was no problem. It's negotiated. The teachers really shouldn't be getting any slack for that. Really, what happened in between? The school administrators union, along with Dr. Superintendent Belair and other central office workers, have all really, you agree to not take a raise, but you make a lot of money to begin with. And I really don't think that's, in all due respect, all that impressive. The comments online were about the greedy teachers and other greedy unions. Why? Because the public really buys all this spin. The teachers and support staff are the most important fact in the education of our kids and the lives of our kids. No offense, but really, central office, it's not that important to the kids. It really isn't. You don't have that much of an effect on the kids. And I think that they need to be, I think the problem with unions not giving back money and not agreeing to that is they don't have a lot of faith in what you're really doing with the money. We all know there's line item discretion. You have that. You get a chunk sum, you can do whatever you need to do with that line item. And I think I heard with the football problem now with the possible lockout. It's a trust thing. It's a trust issue. Truly, if teachers or secretaries of the other unions truly believe that we're all doing the best with our money, and that relates to comments I made previous on the money we have spent and wasted in the last year, they will be more willing to give. But they're not willing to give for the foolishness and the lack of, I should read what I wrote, it's much easier when that happens. I really think the administration, the Board of Ed messed up. You really messed up, and whatever happened with all that drama about the superintendent situation, and now we're all paying the price. The kids are paying the price. The unions are paying the price. The unions are said to be greedy. The secretaries, everybody's greedy. And I think that's really bad, and I think it's also bad with the drama about the teachers, because the veteran teachers aren't going to agree to what you're asking them, that teachers are going to lose their job. I think that's an awful position to put them in, and I think that's a very unfair position, and I think it's a very untrue position. So I just wanted to make those comments. I'm really distressed when I hear the comments about the greedy support staff and the greedy teachers. I really think the fault lies somewhere else. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Rowe. I had a voice, but it's been drying out of me tonight. I'm a resident. I have 2 kids in the school, and like I said, I appreciate the work that you do going through the budget. The culture of continuous improvement is very important. Unfortunately, I know too much about continuous improvement, and what that comes down to is it's an elimination of waste. And eventually, when you eliminate a lot of waste, there's not much more to improve, and sometimes you need to find a way to generate revenue. And I just ask, and I wonder, has the board ever looked at ways to use our facilities to generate revenue? I know in the past I've rented the gym for my kids' birthday parties. I don't know if that's going on anymore. I know in the summers, if the properties lay empty, there are opportunities to bring organizations in that may want to have concerts or religious groups that want to have a ball. So I just ask if there's a way to generate revenue, that would be a different approach than just finding ways to cut.
Good evening, Teresa Walensky, RTM member, but I'm here tonight as a resident and a parent in the schools. I guess I only have to I could address a million things. What I will talk about is the AP tests and the caps and gowns. I've had 2 kids graduate from high school. I've got 2 more coming behind. My daughter, to think that public education is a free education is to ignore the realities of what we pay all the time. As parents, we pay for all sorts of things. We give money to the fundraisers when our kids are in the sports teams. We pay for their athletic warm-up wear. We don't pay for their uniforms. We pay for their warm-up wear. We write checks all the time. I thought I paid $175 for the ECE credits that my daughter transferred into her college and saved us a boatload of money at the college level. I'd pay for those AP tests again in a heartbeat to save the kind of money I'm paying at college. It is not a problem. Parents were used to writing the checks. And if we had to write an extra $25 for that athletic gear to pay to play, we would do it. If it meant that our kids could do the things that the schools have offered, we pay for it anyway. We pay for it in fundraisers. We pay for it, pick a thing. We all do it. So it's not to say that it's free is really kind of a mistake. Plus, we're paying for it in our taxes. Public education isn't really free. But so if we have to pay for caps and gowns, would we care? I don't think so. Would we say, oh, I'm sorry, hon, you can't graduate today because I got to pay $30 for caps and gowns? No way. We take those pictures. We're full of pride. We're happy to have them do it. Earlier, Mr. Blevins, you had suggested that if they were going to reinstate something, they should suggest where they're going to cut. And you suggested you had problems with the 2 cuts, but you didn't suggest where you were going to cut. So I'd love to hear that. And lastly, I have to say something to all the parents here. If you care about this stuff as much as you do, when you go home tonight, call the head of your party in town, Republican or Democrat, I don't care which, and tell them you'll run for office. Because we need people to run for office in town. We're always looking for people to run for office in town. You're here, you care, run for office. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
talk about what they're most passionate about, and I understand that. I have no children, but I live in town, I pay my taxes, I have tons of nieces and nephews who use the school system. One of the things I did hear was the cuts in the sports programs at the high school. Personally, I would rather see cuts at the junior highs because you do not have recruiters at junior highs looking at kids to go to colleges. At the high school, stand a better chance. Indoor track, golf. Golf, can you combine with New London, possibly have a New London Waterford team like other schools do currently. The thing I have not heard tonight is alternatives to help pay for these programs, tag, different things. I'm going to address something that may have already been addressed in your first round of cuts. I do not know. And the reason I'm suggesting this is it does not cut an individual. Currently, you have different administrators who are going to be retiring, if I'm not mistaken. You have a junior high principal who is retiring. Why can you not move one of the 3 administrators that is at the high school over to the junior high and save $150,000? There's your tag program. There's your after-school programs. There's quite a few different programs. But on top of it, it's also a couple teachers' salaries. That is a suggestion I would like to make. Look at the administration. Is there people retiring where you're not going to be eliminating jobs? Okay. Something that was said earlier, I'm not going to comment on. Just I'll talk to that gentleman privately about the revenue sources. But other than that, I'm just asking you to please look at people who are retiring, possibly moving positions, so that you don't have to cut some of these other alternative programs or teachers. Thank you.
I'm not important enough.
No. Battery.
That's the only reason I came up. Jason Abner. Jason Abner. I'm one of the high school counselors at Waterford, obviously, because we're in Waterford. I'm a little nervous, as you can tell. I just want to mention I went to Daniel Hand High School, a fairly well-off district, and there was no pay-for-play when I was there, but we all paid for parking spots. We all paid for our AP exams, and I do want to point out there is an inconsistency, as was mentioned by one of the parents who works in the district, where there are ECE classes. Kids who go to the UConn classes do pay. It's not negotiable. So I do feel that's a very inconsistent philosophy, and I think by cutting 50%, I totally understand the politics of it, but just as what I've seen in politics, by cutting in half, you irritate everyone and please no one fully. So I would suggest the full gamble there. I mean, it's only $11,000, but that sounds like a heck of a lot considering how many line items the superintendent had to find. 2 things I want to make mention of, and first and foremost for me and my family is the healthcare issue. It sounds like it's the driving force. I understand that you have created a committee. It was my understanding last year that both union members, faculty, residents would all be invited to said committee. I made it known to everyone who I met, strangers on the street, my administration, Superintendent Collins, that I want to be a part of that committee. I have a vested interest in it. I have never heard nor seen any notification of the meeting. I was told that notice was put up in central office. To me, and that's what the letter of the law says, to me, that's following the letter of the law but not the spirit. If you want cooperation, by all means, I would have sacrificed a lot to make sure that my compatriots at all levels weren't fired or lose their job at the end of the year. I just feel it's not a very transparent process. I appreciate, and I don't know all your names, I apologize, that there is a committee meeting. No, you're good. I appreciate that you're meeting, and I don't want to be so selfish that I have to be a part of it, but I feel like it is not transparent. You have these wonderful digital signs everywhere, and I've never seen that used for announcements, and I would love it. I think if the community could sit in, at least at the very minimum, we know you're doing something. And I don't doubt that you are, but I didn't know it until this meeting. And that's a very frustrating thing coming from the other side. When I know that there's give and take, I feel a lot more willing to give, personally. And at least I get that. All right, and then the other thing I have concerns about, and I haven't talked to my special education friends, is the reduction of the secretarial position there. I worry very much, and I don't know what the inner workings of the decision are, so maybe that there's a lot of talk, and we were just hearing about it, the administrators, that you get rid of one and they can spread out the wealth. Just keep in mind that there are reasons why they're hired, that in fact that there is a lot of work, and that if you spread the wealth of the jobs that are currently there, my guess is, unless you, just like you add a program, you cut a program, you have to find the finances, they're not going to do their job as well. Because if you add, eventually you're going to be squeezing blood from a stone, and it's not going to be a pretty picture. I know that it's happening in my department right now in guidance. So you need to be very cautious about that, and I feel like it's a very short-term view. If you eliminate the secretarial position, so much of special education is based off of timelines, and I think I can look, if I won't dare, to add my special education friends, because I have screwed this up a couple of times, and they have not hurt me because of it. But if you lose, Ms. York, who's this position, I fear that in the short term you may gain some money, but in the long term that legal costs may well overwhelm anything you save by cutting the position for the foreseeable future. I really worry that if you give people a lot to do, things are going to fall through the cracks, and that's a huge expense if legal folks get involved after that. So thank you for coming. I appreciate all of your work, and I hope you listen to my comments. Thank you.
My name is Claire LaBelle. I am a special ed teacher at the high school, and I can tell you it's my blood you're asking for. I work hours into the night doing the special ed paperwork required. I know that the secretary is my backstep. If she wasn't there, meetings aren't going to get scheduled. I have so much to do already in the 45 minutes or an hour period that I have for planning. Right? I don't know how it would get done. If you cut her position, you're going to see a backlog of paperwork, because when it comes down to it, I have to do my lesson plans, I have to teach. Paperwork is the things I do after school. And if you don't believe my work, go in and check my logs. Go in and see what I'm doing at night on SimsNet. Right? I am there until 8, 9 o'clock at night, because things get sent back to me because I forgot to capitalize, I forgot a period, I put hour instead of hours, or hours instead of 0.5 hour per report. The secretary does that at the high school. She's working constantly. She's covering bases for all the special ed teachers in that school, not just me. She covers for Mrs. Malone, who needs to get information out to us. You can only do so much through the email. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. There were several points brought up that need a reason in Parks and Recreation, which was passed by the RTM originally 1988. Thank you. Where the Parks and Recreation has the authority to use the school facilities, and they schedule school facilities outside of school hours. Any revenue from that goes into the town general fund, not to the Board of Education. There's a little fancy bookkeeping footwork that charges off the maintenance and custodial services involved with that. We provide the maintenance and services, but there's a transfer from Parks and Rec to cover our expenses, but it just covers our expenses. Anything else goes into the town general fund. No. 11,000 down. We'll waste it.
If I may go back to the original suggestions I had made, there were a few there that were not contradicted, and if you go back, it looks like about 15,000. If you add the 11, now we're coming up to 26,000, perhaps, and this is something the board to consider. Perhaps we could put a partial tag teacher in place for next year, and then continue to review and look at tag fully so that we can continue, because I know a few years back the Board of Education spent a lot of time looking on how to move forward the talented and gifted program, and it was part of our goals and initiatives to do that, and it just seems a little bit counterproductive at this time to eliminate. If we could just hold on to a piece of it for the next year with those cuts that we've mentioned, perhaps we can then put the team together to really see how to move that program forward as well.
I certainly, would you specify the cuts that you suggested earlier, just so I can keep track of what
If I can find it.
when you get it, when you find it.
I remember they were, some of the advertisement, a little more on the advertisement, some more on the postage or travel. You explained we could not, and then the contracted services, which have to do with miscellaneous contracted services. Let me get the figures out.
Oh, wait, Judge, you want
Even if we don't do that, if we have students pay completely for the AP exam and also the caps and gowns, that'll give us a little over $17,000 right there, right?
Another 11.
Another
22,
11.
you'd be almost at 29. It would be 28,786.
So would we be able to reinstate like 0.5 or 0.6?
Well, see, you've already, if you go with these two recommendations, these have already been reduced, so the only new dollars you've picked up are 11,000.
we already, the caps and gowns were already given the recommendations. So the only thing concrete, we're waiting on Kathleen's got some extra, but right now it's just the 11,000 extra for the.
These are just very small because I would like, just if I may, done the public saying that I wouldn't want anyone to think the board was very lightly cutting teachers for any reason at all. This budget has been thoroughly investigated, I can tell you, by all of us here and gone through with a fine-tooth comb. I would be interested to see that those that think there's some room in here, I'd be delighted to see they could look at the budget and kind of let me know where it is. On the contracted services on page 65, they came to an additional $9,836. The page 51, advertising was an additional $2,463. Postage was an additional $978, and then the discussion was whether we could just suspend our dues for the Coalition of Justice for 1 year at $1,500, and then if you put back in the travel, because originally that was $17,133. If you put back the travel, it's up to $14,777.
Kathleen, what was the elimination in the other purchase services?
On the contracted services, which was miscellaneous for said other contractual as necessary. We pay for pest control and for
software support. So with our financial software, we have an annual maintenance fee. Otherwise, we don't have the software.
I understand that. But if it just were to go to the, we had budgeted last year the 80,000. We used 43. And the year before it was at 34, and that would just give us the extra 9,000.
That's 36,600.
Right.
Kathleen, could you go line by line, please?
Yeah, I don't see which ones you're talking about.
Well, I was going, if you look on page 65,
65 is a combination of many different lines.
Right.
66 is the next page.
Right.
66 is where it's line by line.
Well, I just went from the actual from 2009, the actual expenses in 2009 to what we were proposing here in 2011.
Kathleen, many of your line items, like you were talking about travel, just for district-wide itinerary, travel for special education teachers, travel for administration, and our maintenance crew. And we did look at those very carefully. I just am asking that you do it line by line so that I can respond to the reasons why we maintain a level of funding.
Okay, well, I'll get back in a few minutes on that. I'll go through this. What I did actually was go to the actual expenditure and then look to what you had suggested, which was quite a bit of a cut. I just thought there might be a little bit more there that we could possibly use, but I didn't add up the actual line, so maybe I'm wrong.
We've actually reduced that account by $24,480 from the current fiscal year, so that reflects a 12% decrease.
It's tight, it's very, very tight. It was not easy to do this at all.
I'll get back to my board in a minute, but if we look at the other, I know the advertising was the same, but I'm just trying to see if we can squeak out just a tiny bit more.
But
Try to hold on.
just caution on going strictly by looking at what was actually spent 2 years ago. I mean, that was 2 years ago, and although other people keep raising their costs, contracted costs especially, have been going up. So I'm presuming that the 43,000 whatever for contracting services here is based on the actual cost of the services that we intend to contract for. So if we're going to reduce that back to those levels, I think we have to give up something that we.
And I understand that some of it we cannot, which you explained with the, I'll go through it and see if I can.
Jerry.
Our actual was 3,116, and we're budgeting 8,000. Is it?
Help us out.
Oh, that right where Kathleen was talking about.
66.
Yes. It just jumped out at me. There's probably a reason for it.
Down to field trip at Weston High School.
Yeah, Waterford High School.
It needs to be a different W. Can you help us with that, Mr. Macrino? Does this deal with athletics in any shape or form, or is it part regular field trips at Waterford High School?
Terry, were you talking about regular Waterford High School field trips or the athletic?
Regular field trip WHA.
Under 8,000?
Yes. Actual was 3,116, and we're budgeting
910, it's budgeted at 8, so there was a reason for an increase.
Those would be Project O and so forth. The reason for the increase would just be the increase in transportation items back.
Noted somewhere around possibly 5,000.
Yeah, it's not good what I hoped.
Maybe a starting point. Is there anything on the roster of the 49 or 50 items that we ought to eliminate? That we need to take off, because if we take anything off, we have to come up with something to replace it to get to the 2.99%. Maybe that's the place to start before we think about adding anything back into the budget. Is there anything on here? There's been a suggestion by Don that we reduce the entire amount for advanced placement tests, so that picks up 11,000. Is there a consensus on the part of the board to move in that direction? Nodding. So we at least 5. So is there anything else on this roster that stands out that you can't support?
I'm still going to have a hard time with the athletic cuts until we have a serious discussion of pay for play or an activity fund. And along those same lines, I think if we instituted an activity fee, we might find ourselves with funds to reinstate some of the supplemental music stuff as well. Because it just doesn't necessarily have to be, limited to athletics. If we had an activity fee for music, drama, any other extracurriculars, we may find ourselves with an additional revenue stream that would help fund some of those programs that we're whacking at here too.
Don, I'd like to echo Tim's feelings on that too. If we're going to eliminate the paying for AP tests, I can't see how we cannot we consider pay for play?
We certainly should reconsider. I'm concerned that it's a complex and somewhat divisive issue that I don't think is going to be resolved before the beginning of this coming fiscal year. So if you want to operate on the assumption that we will figure out a way to do pay for play by the following year, and therefore we don't want to eliminate these sports programs in this year, we still have to find some way to pay for them this year. So if we take those off the reduction list, and we have to come up with $24,000, $25,000 to continue those programs in here.
The pay for play, which we tend to use that term, it has to be expanded to not be pay for play, but pay for participate, because there are many school extracurricular activities that are very analogous to sports. So it has to be a pay for participate. I don't know that it would be that difficult, given the data that we have on the participants of the sports and the participants in the programs, to do a calculation. And obviously, depending on what fee structure we want to postulate, and then to do a calculation that if we instituted a pay for participate, we could figure out what the revenue would be for that. I mean, it is just a math exercise to determine, given let's say $50 per activity, maybe a maximum of 150 for the school year, and then just do the calculation, because all the numbers are in the back here on the participants. And I am not personally, we all have what we would like to see, what we don't want to see. I've never wanted to see a pay for play, because it does create situations where a person who pays, but their child doesn't play, and that's always going to happen. And then it's going to get very, very complicated. Or a person
platinum memberships and
it's fraught with that I'll call it the ugly side of the pay for play. Why isn't my child playing? I'm paying just as much as so and so. And now that Dave doesn't want to get into that, but that's sort of the ugly side of it. But there are other programs obviously that are more important than sports, and we need to find a way to fund them. So again, when do you need to submit the final budget to the Board of Finance?
Well, we have a couple of issues. We have a Board of Education meeting scheduled for next Thursday, and the staffing reductions here have an impact. We need to take action, and I need to have a conversation with those individuals over the next couple of days. So that's one piece of it that's critical. We go to the Board of Finance on the 28th, I believe, of March, so I think it's incumbent upon us to really have this budget wrapped up as far as what we're presenting. I will tell you, in our deliberations, we looked at a variety of models. We've run some simulations. We actually looked at students from 2009-10, because that was hard data for the entire year. Now, I will say to you, we looked at only the athletics, but there's been a comment here. We offer a number of activities, and you can come up with a minimal fee of $25. You also set up a guideline that if there's a family that is in a difficult situation, then you waive that. You have free and reduced lunch as one of your criteria. We also have a good heart, so we don't want to turn anybody away at the door for any of these activities. But we looked at as you were talking, I looked through my pile of papers. We were looking at, and this is for a frame of reference, and it doesn't have to be like this, but $100 per sport per student with a cap of $400 for a family. So if there's more than one child in the family and they participate in 8 activities, the cost just caps at $400. And all fees would be waived if the student was on free or reduced lunch or the family was going through difficult financial stress.
Last year, we had 766 athletes. 537 of them were unique or individual. So that meant that 229 were playing multiple sports. With that as a structure, and then saying approximately 60 or so would get a scholarship for the activities, that would generate $60,400. Say you did half of that, that generates $30,000. Now if you take a look at your other activities and come up with a nominal fee of $25 or $50, you may eventually get back to close to the $50,000, $60,000. We also know that it would require us to do some bookkeeping. We need to make sure we handle all of the guidelines associated with that. It would cause a little increase in our secretarial support, and we factored that in here. So with this, we figured, with these numbers, approximately $50,000. But we could modify that if we felt that that was too high, but you're also talking tonight about expanding that to some other kinds of activities, just not sports.
I know I'm being stubborn, but I don't believe in pay-for-play in anything at the high school. I feel sports, music, and drama should be part of the high school experience. And parents do, as Teresa has said, when my two daughters played sports, we had to buy warm-up suits, the sneakers they needed, the cleats, and things like that. So I'm just totally against it.
Are we at an impasse, or are we all just thinking? Frankly, I'm with Teresa, as you know, on the pay-for-play thing, but I can suggest, I guess, the procedure that we could use is if the majority wants to institute pay-for-play and maintain this year programs, some of these programs that we're eliminating, I would suggest that we could remove this list and stipulate that we will come up with a pay-for-play system that does raise at least that amount of money. And if that means $100 fees, that's what it has to be. If it means $200 fees, that's what it has to be. Because we have to, as many governors keep saying, we're broke. No, we have to balance the budget.
Can you say that again? I didn't follow what you said. Are you saying you keep indoor track and golf with the pay-for-play? I didn't hear you.
I said the proposal some people have made is they want to keep, in particular, indoor track and golf.
Those are the two that are on tonight.
Right. And I said that we can do that if we come up with the money to pay for it. And one way of doing that would be commit ourselves to instituting pay-for-play and with whatever fees are necessary in order to match at least that number.
Thank you, Chris. I just needed to clarify that.
Yeah.
Are you also going to look at freshman sports since that was in the prior budget proposal, or just sports that are on the docket tonight?
That would be a motion that would have to be made. Right now, the only thing that's been mentioned is those two, indoor track and golf.
Should be paid to participate, like somebody said. It's not just sports. If you want your child involved in extracurricular activities,
we will discuss, we will specify, if that's what the direction we're going to go, we'll have to specify that, what we intend. Yeah.
I think that if we institute a pay for participation and we are able to calculate or forecast additional revenue, we should be looking at everything that we're cutting and deciding what has the highest priority for our educational needs. To me, that doesn't mean that if we go pay for play, we can have golf again, because that may not be our highest priority. So I don't think that's again, I'm not for pay for play. I'm not for pay for participation, but I understand that we are where we are, and we need to do the best we can for these children. It might be something that we do 1 year to help us get through this 1 year. But again, if we go and forecast additional revenue for pay for participation, I don't think that automatically means we can have indoor track or golf. We want to look at what else we're cutting and what is the highest priority, and where should we apply that.
Yep.
that funding should go to extracurriculars, so that if we're looking at pay for participation in music and drama and athletics, then the additional revenues should go to reinstating programs in music and drama and athletics.
So we sit here because we represent the town, right? The voters elected us. And although they're not all in this room right now, and not everyone that is here spoke, I heard loud and clear that paying to play and paying to participate is not terrible. I heard them say that, that's acceptable for them as parents, and that we should be focusing on more of the educational types of things that we do, like TAG. So I support the pay for play, pay to participate, so that we can institute the things that they really want to see us have, like TAG and instrumentals, that sort of thing.
Are you advocating then that we institute pay for play and compensate by shifting money that's currently in the extracurriculars, sports and after-school stipends for teachers, that kind of thing? Shift money that we currently have budgeted for that out of there, replace it with pay for play funds, and use that money to hire a tag teacher, for instance?
I would say yes to that.
It would mean, though, that we'd have to raise enough money by pay for participation fees, not just to cover the $4,000 or whatever's here, but to generate essentially the salary for a tag teacher, $60,000 plus benefits or something like that.
I would suggest that we have Michael and Jerry and Craig go back and look at the figures, and maybe we can talk about this next Thursday when we meet and see really what this means for us.
Could I see if we have a consensus on the board? Because if we're going to put the energy into this, is that the full opinion of the board? Is that a direction you want us to look at? Versus if we go through all of this, if we don't have the support here, I'd just like to get a sense of the support.
I may, Don?
Yes, Kevin.
Originally and theoretically, I was not in favor of pay for play in any way. We looked at that before, and it did not seem to be the consensus of the community. I think we're in a very unusual time this year, and we've heard tonight that a lot of our programs are being looked at and perhaps not going to maintain the level of quality that we would like to see them at. So I'm open to investigating where and how much we could save, how we possibly could transfer to save the TAG program this year and to continually study. But I would also like for the policy committee to begin seriously looking for new ways to create funding from outside. Because I think one of the ladies said it was naive to think that this was short term. However, I do believe that the health cost claims have driven us to this particular time, and that while it'll still be difficult times, that if we can weather right now, find a way to maintain, hold on to what we need, I'm open to at least looking at it.
Okay, to be clear, what are we talking about Sherry's proposal, where we generate enough money by pay to participate in order to provide an additional teacher for TAG?
I like what Tim had said before, that we need to also look at the other areas and not divide that, but I'm thinking if we can save, if we have excessive funds in here, after we were looking, as I was going through that, and I apologize to Michael for not having the line item, but that's what I was attempting to do, to try to find if there's any additional resources that we can come up with to try to hold on to that program. I would be open to hearing that, but I'm not quite sure just how much we can generate, if it would be excess monies, and how we could distribute that. I'd like to keep it fair and equitable.
within some ethical limits, you can generate just about as much money as you want from pay to participate. You charge higher fees and for more things. And if you want to charge high enough fees to cover an additional teaching position, you can do it. But I mean, that's the decision. If you only want to generate pay-for-play in order to reinstate these two particular athletic programs, then that's a different proposition, one that I will oppose. Jody will. I don't know about everybody else.
This one, if you're paying to participate in a specific thing, I think it should go towards whatever you're participating in.
If it did go to pay for that, it would pay for the coaches and it would pay for the coaches and the assistant coaches, right? And whatever else, maybe some travel costs, if it's paying for that particular sport, which would free up some money for other things that we've taken out of the budget already. Yes, no?
Yep.
So as to your yes and no, it's both. Because if you're looking at it for pay to participate and you're looking at it to line on a specific sport, you're never going to get the cost for that sport. To give you an example, right now, if you're looking at reinstating the golf, 10 players, you're talking about raising $1,000 per student to have the golf program. So you can't look at it in a strict sense in that way. And I want to make one other point, and then you can go on if you want, but I think the point here right now is we have to decide whether we're looking at the $1.2 million and whether we agree with that. Because, as Jerry said, he has to make some decisions on some of the staff members that have to get notices. There's no reason why we can't continue the discussion on pay to participate. And because you can give a layoff notice and then not lay off if the revenue comes in that you can handle that. But we have to at least address that issue at this point. So I think right now we've still only come up with $11,000, which is not reinstating much of anything. I think what we ought to do is vote on the reductions and look for the ways to either increase the revenue to help us, whether it be pay to participate, a couple other things. He had mentioned, there was a mention of the school buildings use. And I'm not necessarily talking about just about sports, but is there a possibility that we can contact, let's say, like Western Connecticut State University or Central, and use these buildings for classrooms and maybe generate some revenue from that? There are a lot of things that we can look at that maybe we haven't looked at. And the other issue that I know has always been tacky, and we've talked about it and we voted it down before, and we talked about advertising. And I'm not saying that we have to sell out sponsorships where, our athletes can only wear Adidas shoes because they have a sponsorship. But there's no reason why I don't think we can't sell advertising space around the football field, where we can have banners or placards that are put up by merchants, and they can pay for the advertising for that space. But those are long-term issues, and nothing that's going to help us, not anything that's going to help us tonight. So, that's my comment.
That's a good comment, and I think that's a point well made. That I would propose that we approve the items before us with the understanding that we're going to explore additional revenue with the possibility of reinstating, with no promise, but the possibility of reinstating some of these things. Is that? Yes. But in particular, I haven't heard anyone say that they think they can find enough money to not lay off the personnel that are listed here. And that's the point, because notice has to be given. Okay. With that, do we want to vote to that effect, or we want more discussion this evening? Your motion?
Can we divide this at all? Is it possible to vote on a piece of this tonight and to think about it a little longer for the final vote on the board bed meeting on?
Well, what I'm thinking of and listening to the discussion, if you took action on this, we come back with a pay to participate proposal. It then allows you at a later date to reinstate anything that we've reduced. And so that gives you some flexibility. That may not impact staffing at all. It may all go to, for example, indoor track or golf. Or there may be some additional funds, and then it would allow you to do something else that you have on this list.
I hear what you're saying, Kathleen, but I think that's equivalent to what was just said. My fear about removing certain things right now is that it's like any complicated agreement. I am willing to swallow some of these things because of something else, and if you start pulling pieces out, the whole thing everybody has an objection to something, and we can't try to rearrange things.
Well, now, I'd like to make the motion that we accept the budget as presented this evening with the changes that Jerry has presented, with the understanding that we're going to continue to look at finding additional revenues and funding, and then we will select which programs we will reinstate considering the amount of money we have and what we consider to be the priorities. I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion on that?
In order to take that vote tonight, then, my understanding is that we will be seeking additional revenues. We made some suggestions tonight. There were a few of mine that could be looked at, and that we would come back with that figure, and then we would open this up to discussion again from the board as to just which items we would or would not vote for. So we're just actually voting tonight at a bottom line figure amount.
The items on this list?
Right.
You're voting on the items on this list.
But they're open to change.
Or reinstatement when there's additional revenue. And one of the suggestions you made is you're starting with an additional 11,000 from the AP line.
And that's what I was going to ask. Are we talking about as presented or with the additional cut in the AP? Or the additional?
I think you make the cut.
The motion I made was as presented. The AP is certainly one of the things, the additional things we're going to look at for increased revenue.
So right now it's as presented.
But I think we've heard sentiment that we're willing to make that. The change in the AP test as John has talked about. I just have one other thing I wanted to say, because I know that giving a person notice that they're being laid off with the possibility of that being rescinded, I don't think there's anybody here that takes that lightly. That is very disruptive to people. They're not sure what their future holds. Again, I just want to say I don't think that there's anybody here that's taking that lightly. That we'll lay them off and call them back. That's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to come through. So I just wanted to make sure that people don't think we're taking it.
One of the things
that I would like to restate what you were saying, Kathleen, to make it a little clearer, is yes, we will seek additional revenues. We are always seeking things, but we will seek additional revenues, but I don't think we can imply or promise that anything on this list will come back. We can't promise that. I'm trying to avoid the mistake we made with Russian sports last year.
And you're most likely not looking at revenue to hire back staff that are on this list. That's significant dollars that you're talking about. So just to keep that in mind.
point wasn't necessarily to be looking there, but there were some very valuable suggestions made by the audience tonight that sought ways to keep some of the items that we will be cutting tonight that look possibly feasible to do, and that's really where I'm heading. I just want to be careful. I understand what you're saying, but I'll have difficulty with this if I feel that we're not going to be able to at least come back and say this is where we are, and we'll have that discussion.
Certainly, many times probably before July 3rd.
I'm just going to restate that I'm not going to be comfortable voting for this in this present formation, because I have serious reservations about creating a revenue stream from a participation fee that is just plugged into the general fund. And then we roll the dice and see where we want to spend that money. If we're going to really look into that, I think it has to be a revenue stream that is directed at the extracurricular activities that produce it. And if I felt more comfortable with that, I would say, yeah, let's go ahead and try to come up with that. But in its present formation, I'm very unsure about that.
Any other comments? If there's no more discussion on this, the motion is to approve the changes to the budget as submitted by the superintendent and continue working to alter the pieces of it that are not time pressure, that we don't have to act on right away. Is that pretty much wrap it up? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Abstained? Okay. So, 6-1. This was a special meeting, so there's no other business that we can take up tonight. So the motion to adjourn is in order. Thank you, everybody.
Okay,